Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Sam and this is The Lonely Chapter, a show where we speak to interesting people, finding out their stories, discovering what motivates them, whilst also learning from their highs and their lows. Today we're learning from Rob Reed. Rob's path has been anything but ordinary. From athlete to musician to army helicopter pilot, Rob learned early on the value of leadership and teamwork in high pressure situations. However, his desire for broader impact, to create real lasting change, led him to dive into the business world. Expect to learn how you can get on top of your personal finances, the importance of overcoming adversity in your life, and what led Rob to author his new book, which blends the important life lessons with an engaging fictional storyline. Thank you for listening. This one was made for your enjoyment. Rob, firstly, thank you for coming on today.
It's a pleasure. Lovely intro. Thank you.
It's difficult to know where quite to start. So you've been an athlete, you've been a musician, and you've been an army pilot as well. So can you just start by sort of briefly taking us through that journey? What took you to each of those aspects?
Yes. Being lost.
Okay.
I never knew who I was. It took me a long time to work that out. I had no real guidance either. And I think that was a real benefit because it unknowingly enabled me to try a load of different things. At the time, thinking this is the thing. And as you could probably imagine, from that background, I put a lot of hard work into trying to be as good as I can at that thing at the time. But it never felt right. So I then tried something else, found that I either liked that, could do that, even if I didn't like it, or it was the acceptable thing to do. And so I was still finding my feet completely lost, bouncing from different thing to different thing. You know, I was afforded some opportunity. I was quite lucky in that aspect. I created some of my own, and worked really hard at each thing, but nothing really ever stuck. So, interestingly, one of the main questions a lot of people always ask, what would you sort of tell your younger self? What's a piece of advice you'd give? Trying loads of different things is the thing that I would give advice to. And actually, I say it to, I'm not that old myself, but those that are leaving education and going into the real world, the thing I say is just try everything. Your 20s is for that. I unknowingly did that. And I've sort of, as you say, had a bit of a mixed pass in the opportunities that I've had.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've spoken to previous guests about that, actually, that trying things, fail at things, learn from it, and then it's one thing that you've learned from. Maybe it's not for you, but you can move forward from that. So what did you sort of learn from those experiences? Did you learn what about sort of leadership and teamwork in those high pressure situations?
I'd say yes, those. But the most important lessons I learned was resilience and knowing who I didn't want to be.
Okay.
And I think those are two things that are super underrated. I'm not saying I'm perfect at them. And I said it wasn't a conscious decision. But knowing who you don't want to be is, I would argue, more important than knowing who you want to be. There's too much pressure with knowing who you want to be. I still don't know who I'm going to be. I have a good path that I want to follow now from mistakes and experiences, but that's built from knowing what paths I now don't want to go down as a person and in my skill set, right? So in what I want to deliver to the world, but as who I want to be in that world too. So the leadership, all of those are skills that can all be learned. The introspection that comes with understanding yourself is the harder thing.
Yeah, I like that insight. I like the idea of working out who you don't want to be, and almost just crossing things off a list and whittling down over time and just narrowing in on what it might look like. But again, not exactly, this is exactly what I want to be, because no one can say, because we change it. If anyone looked back, say 5 years at themselves, I imagine almost everyone would think that person's very different to me because those experiences in that time frame have changed them massively.
Oh God, I hope so. Because if I'm no different to who I was 5 years ago, what the have I done in the last 5 years?
Mm.
I think there's too much pressure on having to understand who you want to be. Uh, that comes from maybe insecure people or people that don't know who they want to be still at middle age, who ask kids in secondary school, "So, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Or "This is a life changing decision. What GCSEs you do is going to prepare you and set you up for the rest of your life." It isn't. My educational background has nothing to do with what I do now, or any of the things that I have done in my life. It makes no sense. My education and my CV do not add up. Uh, one of the things I actually struggled with when I was re-entering the employed world, and so there's too much pressure. And I think, not going to go into it, but the whole social media thing we've discussed just before the podcast started about social media, but there's even more pressure with a lot of people showing or presenting a version of themselves that is so sure that it makes other people believe that they need to be sure of themselves.
Mm.
They don't.
The highlights.
And it's I quite like when someone says to me, "Oh, I have no idea. I'm just going to try this and see how it goes." I love that mindset because it's very open. As soon as someone says, "This is exactly who I want to be and what I want to do," that's a closed mindset.
Yeah.
And there's no room for any adaptation of that, any changes of that. And I think it's a little immature to think that way. So actually, the pressure is on people to have an immature, closed mindset, ironically, and it's just not the case. Um, and I would say any teacher who is asking a child, or any adult who is asking a child, what do they want to be when they grow up? And I ask it because I find it fascinating to see what the response is. But most people that ask it in a serious sense, they didn't know at that age.
Yeah.
They probably still don't know now, nor should they. Again, look at some of the people in life that restart their life at age 50, 60, and they're like, "Oh, I actually really got into painting," or recently I've got into creative writing. I found a passion for creative writing that I never would have even crossed my mind to consider. Being open to that has led me down this path, and we'll get on to Pippin's Rich Life soon. But I'm currently writing another book, very different sort of um, genre. But with that, I actually want to get an agent, get published professionally, not to make money or have a change of career. I like to do things as professionally as I possibly can in whatever I do. But that is the passion. I would never have considered that. So it's nice to be open to things no matter what age. So there's too much pressure on people, I think, to know that.
Yeah. Sort of makes me think of when I was that age, and when you come out of school, it's always, well, it seems to be that you get pushed towards university as almost a standard. And I didn't get the choices I went for because I sort of purposely chose higher grades than I was going to get. And in a way, that was a blessing, because I then went on that sort of journey that you talk about, where I was at that stage, I wasn't going to university, and I thought, well, what do I enjoy doing? And at that time, it was fitness, going to the gym. So I got my PT qualification, and I went into that for a bit, and then it went into something else. And that probably taught me, just try what you enjoy, see if it works for you. And if not, there's always something else on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconception as well going the other side of that, which is when people say that you have to work within your passion. You don't. For me, and I can't speak for everyone, but if I make my passion my full-time job, I lose that passion. I lose that interest.
It's not passion anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, and passion is important to have outside of your working scope. I really enjoy what I do work-wise, but I'm not and there's elements that I'm just not passionate about, and it very much is work. I'm willing to do it because of my why, but my passion is writing, and that's why there's no pressure to be published or produce more books or get an income from it. There's no pressure, so it can remain my passion. It's on my terms. I just want to do it professionally.
Yeah.
And so saying that you have to have a job within where your passion lies, I think is a bit of a mistake to tell people. Um, and you only find that out as you do that, as you say, going into being a PT. I mean, it's going to teach you a huge amount about the world and work and business. And I think that's important. But finding feet in that, why can't people just go to the gym and enjoy it, or help their friends with a meal plan and nutrition, or you know, that's great. Having that impact within your friend group, I think and being passionate about it is an amazing thing, and we shouldn't downplay not doing that for the rest of the world. Uh, I'm probably later going to sound like a bit of a hypocrite there because that's kind of what I'm doing with the whole finance literacy stuff.
Okay. Well, we'll get onto that in a moment. So, going back to your sort of like journey to where you are now. So, you experienced a period of homelessness as well. Are you okay to just tell us a little bit about that? Maybe what led to that and sort of how that was for you?
There are, like anything, different levels of being without a home. I was very fortunate in the fact that I had a friend who had a salon, his own salon, and I just, when everyone had left, basically I swept and cleaned the floors, and I just slept on the floor of the salon. So I wasn't, outside in a really rough position. Um, I had come from being in a cozy situation. I was living with, at the time, my fiance, who's an absolute gem. Her family were more like my family than my family were. They, took me in as their own. It ended by, mutual agreement, completely amicably, and we still have a huge amount of admiration for her. Um, but rightly so, it was difficult, for both of us. We'd been together a long, long time and had future plans, and my outlook on life had changed, and it was unfair to try and get her to join that journey. And so it was one of the hardest times of my life emotionally, because I'd lost my partner, my best friend, my family, and therefore where I was living. Now, they'd offered to house me as long as I needed, but there's a line, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I had to respect her and her space and everything. I had just given away all of my savings. I didn't expect that to come up. So someone was in a really bad position financially and was considering if their life insurance would pay out on certain instances of death.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't a conversation that you should be having internally, externally at all. So I gave them all of my savings, got them out of the hole, and they could live. Uh, we set up a loan agreement. I never expected it back, and I never will get it back. As I say, I never expected it back, so it's not an issue. The timing was just unfortunate, because when I then had to move out and do various different things, and I just started a business at the time. So, as any business owner will know, at the beginning, there's just very little money in it because you're reinvesting everything. So you don't want to detriment the business by taking a salary. So, yeah, I had no money at all. Not jumping forward too much, but that was the defining moment in what I'm doing now, because I'd been to university. I had been an officer in the British Army. I'd been a pilot for a period of time of that. And here I am with no money, with nowhere to stay, my friend's salon, not having sort of a prospect of what the future held. And I thought it was baffling how I was in that position. Having a there are privileges in this world that are afforded to us, and there are certainly people in worse positions. And I never expected that to come. So yeah, I mean, put it this way, I think I'd mentioned it once in a bit of an outraged argument with my brother, but no one in my family knows about it, and nor should they, nor would they. Interestingly, they would know if they read the back of the book. They've read the book, but if they read the author section, they'd find out. But there was a lot more going on that I'm not prepared for that conversation with them anyway. So it's probably a good thing that they don't dig into the weeds of the writing.
Yeah. And then you said in there about how that led to where you are now. So you obviously working in finance now. So what led you to go that way after that experience?
Sheer anxiety. I tend to run towards the fire. I run towards the bad thing. Um, no idea why. People sort of fight, flight, or freeze. Um, I don't tend to fight. I kind of do. Um, but I'm interested to see how hot the fire is. So when I had that understanding, do you know what it was? It was I was trying to make the businesses not successful. I'll explain what I was trying to do with the business I had at the time. But I was trying to learn as much as possible about business and entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
And as was the case with personal finance, when it came to business finance, which is a different beast, I had the overwhelming anxiety of being in the dark. I did not know where to start. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know what I was doing. And the fear of not knowing, the fear of the unknown led me to run towards the fire and try and get as much understanding as possible. And people were talking about simple business financial terms, cash flow and P&L. Had no idea what the difference was. I didn't even know what P&L stood for. And then I sort of linked it to my personal finances, realized I didn't have a clue what was going on there either. And so I tried to learn as much as I possibly could, same with business, about the business finances. And then I took an interest in personal finances. That was the setup for the day that a friend of mine and I spent in Starbucks. And we knew that the businesses that we had were there to teach us to cut our teeth in entrepreneurship. But the business we actually wanted to have was a social impact business. And so we sat down and we literally got sheets of A4 and we wrote down every single thing we thought was wrong, an injustice in the world. Um, and then we sort of grouped those into categories, overarching categories. Basically, why? Asking, why does this happen? So what? All those questions. Once we'd grouped it into all these different categories, we crossed out and made a conscious decision to try and not get angry about the ones that we could not do anything about. There is limitations to, what
Yeah.
humans can do, but also certain humans to do. Us average Joes with no money and no influence, there was a limit. So we crossed those out. Let's try and not get angry about those because there's nothing we can actually do about them right now. Okay, let's cross out the ones that we don't want to do anything about. And it sounds odd to say with injustice and everything else, but we all have our priorities and our passions in what we value more. Almost certainly everything in that sheet was getting dealt with in one way or another, but where do we want our contributions? And the thing, and in fact ended up being the biggest circle anyway,
Right.
was the personal finance issue. The illiteracy in personal finance caused or contributed to so many of these injustices and sufferings.
Mm.
And the more I delved into that, the more concerned I became with the stats. And it's actually, I mean, I came across thousands of stats. The one that sticks in my mind is in my pitch deck for the business that I'm starting. 1 in 5 people, 1 in 5 adults in the UK alone have had suicidal thoughts because of financial difficulties.
Wow.
And that like sends a shiver down my spine. Like, and so I was like, right, well, that's what I'm going to do. Like, I've just started learning about this stuff. I'm a I'm a key person here in why this is important and how this is getting overlooked. If someone that's managed to become a officer in the British Army is falling into this category, holy there's a load of people that are going to be left behind. Um, and we discussed, self-help books, nonfiction, that sort of stuff isn't cutting the mustard because the people that are buying those books are interested, so therefore are likely not necessarily to be left behind after they've sparked that interest. So how do you reach the people that don't have that understanding or that interest? And so the idea was sparked of, okay, how can we help people manage their finances in a simple way, proactively, without them to have to know even the basics, so it can do things for them and they can learn as much or as little. They can input as much or as little. They can have as much or as little control as they wish. And no matter where that level is, it will still help them live a lifestyle without the pitfalls that, are literally round the corner if you don't have that understanding or that control.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically the early versions of um, the business, which is now Pipin, were sort of created to help people literally do that.
Yeah. That's a really nice story of sort of how you went through that and how you found that injustice, and you sort of whittled it down to that, and then looking into the effects of it. And yeah, that stat is mind blowing to think. Obviously, suicidal thoughts are something that are very common, a lot more common than people think anyway. But to be about something like you say that you can have some form of control over, if you can help people learn to have that control, then you can have a big impact on those statistics, hopefully. So going into the personal finance stuff, obviously you studied and got qualified as a financial planner. What are some of the things that people get wrong about personal finance?
They don't ask the right questions, and I wouldn't expect them to, because you need to have a bit of knowledge to be able to ask the right questions. But the question that everyone should ask is, what do I need to ask here? There is a massive misunderstanding as to what financial advisors, financial planners, the whole finance industry is. Being in the industry, there's a lot of stereotypes that are quite rightly founded. But there is a lot of reluctance because of those assumptions and stereotypes to even trust or speak to a planner or an advisor. And interestingly, get the right advisor, get the right planner. They are literally there in your best interest, and they have all the knowledge that you don't need. They can educate you onto whatever you ask. That's fine. But it takes that pressure away. I wouldn't expect to fix my boiler or rewire the electrics in the house.
Mm.
Not only I could probably learn it and do it myself, there's a high chance I'm going to get electrocuted or there's going to be water spewing out of pipes, right?
Yeah.
Um, I would much rather it be done properly. Another misconception with planners is they're expensive. I do lots of pro bono work in my own time. I just, it's not officially advice. I can't give official advice, certainly pro bono, but I can get people to ask the right questions or understand their strategic plan in a way that they hadn't thought of before. And having the understanding oversight, even the reassurances that they're doing the right thing or things are going to be okay,
Mm.
it's the best feeling in the world when you can tell someone they can retire 2-3 years earlier than they realized, or their plan isn't achievable, but if they tweak this one thing, if you increase your pension contributions by 2%, which you are not going to see in your pay each month, then you can hit all of your goals and more. I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but so the common mistake is just not asking questions or not asking someone what questions they should be asking.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like the analogy as well of using the electrician or plumber as these are things that we outsource to other people. So why can't finance be the same, I suppose? In terms of uh, for people listening who might be sort of interested in getting started, are there any sort of simple tips, anything that you could suggest that they start with?
Yeah, read the book. Uh, no, in all seriousness, so Pippin's Rich Life, as you've read, is just a fictional novel, right? It's just an easy read. But within there, it teaches some of those basic principles. It doesn't matter if you're 12, 20, 30, 40, 50. It doesn't matter. I've honestly, I've had 60-year-olds read the book and have given the same feedback as 12-year-olds. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. I'm going to start doing that. I've actually recently had a 24-year-old feedback through various channels, um, baffled that she didn't know some of this stuff and has just knowing what she wants to achieve has just started implementing some of the things. I would say the biggest thing and the first thing that the book goes into, um, with the protagonist Liam, tracking. You 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 have to be able to know what's in and what's out.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the company that I'm currently working for is an IFA in London. Now contracting as a business consultant. But I overheard in the staff room today the question, do you think you could live on X a month if you didn't have to pay, for kids, um, but you still have to pay for your bills and your lifestyle? Can you live on X a month? And it was like an open discussion. Yes, it was a hypothetical, but what it showed me, this was today in an IFA for people that are advisors, planners, administrators of financial advice, didn't have a clue where their money was going. Because if they did, if they knew what was going out, ignore what's coming in for now. If you know what's going out, you know what sections of your life you can cut. So if I just cut my housing and bills, how much am I spending a month? If I cut my lifestyle, eating out, holidays, how much am I spending a month? I know all those figures for me. I'm a bit odd in fact that I like the detail. But having a rough idea means that I know that within my eating out budget for the month, I have, say, £120 left for the rest of the month. I'm going out this evening. If that meal comes to £60, then I need to think about when I'm then planning to go out again. And if I go out again and I go over that budget and say I spend £200, I then need to recalculate where's that other £80 coming from? because I'm not going to get paid another £80 more at the end of the month. So something needs to give.
Mm.
So understanding tracking, and therefore you get the understanding naturally of not just what's coming in. That's quite an easy one to track, really, unless you're sort of self-employed and it comes from all sources. Should still know that though. But what's going out? And group categories, and this is a lot of budgeting tools and expense trackers break it down into the granular. You do not need to understand and know your bank statement every month. You just don't. You need to know roughly how much do I spend on going out, whether that's social or eating out, or just group it into massive categories. My budget has 5 items in it. That's it.
What categories would those be?
So for me, travel, food main, so groceries,
Yep.
food out, consumables, and social. And that is it. If you're having any more than 5 categories in your budget, now there are other things. There's 3 sections to truly understanding your lifestyle. That's just the living budget, so the day-to-day expensive. You've then got fixed outgoings, which are different, monthly, annual expenses, or fortnightly, however they're structured. And then you've got what I call envelopes, and that is everything that. And this is the thing that people miss, even professional budgeters miss. We know this is the best example. We know Christmas comes around every single year, right? And yet we're all always like, oh no, I need to spend money on Christmas presents, and then spend January, February, and March paying it off. Why on earth do we do that? I know roughly, it might change, but I know roughly I need to spend on X, Y, Z people. I know I'm probably going to allocate them a budget of no change from last year. So I know roughly, let's say I need £600 for Christmas, all in. How about in January, I just put £50 a month into an envelope? Come December, I have £600 to spend on Christmas. If something happens through the year and I need to cut and that needs to come down because I've had to take that money out to pay something else that I didn't quite expect or hadn't planned well enough for, well, okay, I've taken £60 out of it, so everyone's budget comes down by 10%.
Mm.
The money's still there. So you can plan for literally everything in your life.
Yeah. On that, that makes me think again, sort of about something that I've started doing. Obviously, Christmas is one that everyone goes through, and now that you say it, I don't do that, and I should definitely think about that. But I have started doing it for sort of my car. You're going to pay car insurance every year, and holidays come around. So before, where I was putting one big sum, say, into my savings account, I've started to put a small portion of that into separate pots. And that just builds up each month. So when that insurance comes around, I'm not pulling it out of my savings account. Even though I was saving it anyway, it's more of a mental thing for me. So before, I'd be saving and then I'd have to pull out whatever it is for my insurance. I'd be like, oh, that's just take a big chunk out of my savings now. Whereas now, that's never seen the main savings pot. So I suppose it's slightly different, but it's overcoming that mental thing as well with it.
Yeah, and there's a difference between the logistics of where the money is and the mentality of where the money is. So it's actually a really good example, and it's one that I use for people that say, "Well, I'm paying monthly, and there's no way I can pay monthly and save." Well, it's not. You don't have to implement this immediately. This is a long haul thing, right? And actually, I say long haul. It's a pretty short game. If you let's say your insurance is 1,200 quid a year, which it feels like is becoming the new norm with insurance increases, but you're paying £100 a month. Well, if you can save £25 a month in addition, you might be able to save 20 or 10. It just extends the timeline. Let's say it's an extra 10, come 10 years' time, and this is a long example, you will then have the money saved up to pay that as a lump sum. If you're paying £100 a month, your insurance, let's assume no increase because of insurance companies, your insurance is likely to only actually be £1,000, not 1,200. So you've got 1,200 in the kitty, and then the £100 that you were saving, you're actually now only putting about £80 away a month to save up for next year's. So you don't have to change all of that now, but you're saving money later on by just making small tweaks. Only what you can do. If you can put away an extra 50 quid a month, brilliant, do that. And then in 2 years' time, you can pay your insurance up front, get the lower rate, because, I mean, they're taking a huge amount of money anyway. Why would you want to give them more money? I'd rather that go into the Christmas fund or just, get, I don't know, pay off credit card or whatever it might be in your circumstance. But I mean, I don't know if anyone banks with Monzo, they have pots, right? Envelopes, pots, transitional word, right? So you can put it into the pots. The Pipin app, what it will do is it will show you where your money is in terms of mentally. So it will show you this is money in an envelope. This is money in, set aside for your fixed outgoing that's going up in 2 weeks' time. But logistically, that money might actually sit in your savings account
Hmm.
because you're getting a better interest rate. So great if you can compartmentalize with pots on Monzo, brilliant, but it's not earning you anything in those pots. So sitting in the saving account does make more sense because you're going to earn a little bit of interest, whatever that nominal amount might be. It's still better than not earning anything. So what the app will do is say, this is coming up. It is currently sat here. It needs to be here. You need to move the money. So it deals with the logistics as well as the mental side of things.
Awesome. That sounds really good. So getting onto the book. So obviously it's recently released, your debut book, Pippin's Rich Life. So it's a fictional story. And I think it's a really good, you've hit a good niche with it because like you said, you're getting a lot of important, some of them simple, some of them more advanced financial lessons, but blended with that fictional storyline. So it's a lot easier to read for people. And me being someone who does read quite a bit of nonfiction didn't change how I felt about it. I still found it probably easier to read, much easier to read than some of those nonfiction books. So what led you to first think about writing that book, firstly, and also about that blend? So that blend of fiction and the lessons.
I'm probably going to say a lot, and I apologize, but I will get to the point of the question. Initially, I'd always wanted to educate about the basics. It says in the book, I say on, LinkedIn posts leading up to launch, we're not taught this stuff at schools. The life cycle of a fruit fly we learn about, but we don't learn about basic budgeting. It baffles me. It really does. I don't understand why, and I apologize if I do offend any people here, but this is my misunderstanding, not an insult at all. I don't understand why geography is a subject in its core when finance isn't.
Mm.
The one thing we all have to deal with is finance. I don't have to, if I don't put myself in the situation, have to or can get around speaking French, for example, whereas I had to take a language. Great. I mean, it teaches you a lot of different things. Mainly that I'm terrible at learning languages. I think that's just a general British thing. But finance, it's literally a life skill, and we're not taught it. So I always wanted to sort of approach that at the basic level, and also in a format where I wasn't directly telling people what they needed to do. As we mentioned earlier, if someone's picked up a non-fiction book, not the target audience for the people that probably need to know some of these things. So I always had the idea of, people pick up fiction all the time just to escapism, have a nice evening, lays on the beach and entertain themselves. And a lot of the a lot of the fiction that I read have life lessons in them. The good ones, anyway, you can take something from.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So yeah, that was the intent. Where to start? I am not creative. I am certainly not good at the English language um, in any way. Last time I'd written something creative was in school, and it was dreadful. My English teacher will be able to confirm. And what led me to actually carrying it out? I had severe insomnia for the last 5, 6 years, since flying, actually. Um, and it got so bad at the end of last year and the beginning of this year that only sort of a few people noticed or knew, but I was having 2 or 3 panic attacks a day. I was collapsing. I couldn't see. There was days that I literally could not see. Um, and my boss at the time turned around to me and went, "Go get this fixed. This is unsustainable. Like, health first. Come on." And he just gave me time off, paid time off to go and get myself. When you're not ill, being off sick is a very strange thing because you feel like you're not allowed to leave the house because then people go, "Well, why are you off work?" Well, when you're sleeping for less than an hour a night in 5, 10 minute snippets, that is not well. But you can still, like, and you should go out and still live life. You should still go and exercise and do all those things. So it was a really odd time, and I felt extremely guilty for it. So I figured, there was a few other things going on, but I like to fill my time. So why not try that project, see, and just see. And I wrote the book in. It was actually uh, at the end of that. So when I was a bit more sort of cognitively with it, and my friend had just died, um, and I was writing a LinkedIn post which was "screw the world" type. This is how I cope with a lot of things that happen. Is I write a "screw the world" post on whatever social media platform that first started on MySpace, right?
Yeah.
And then I would post it, and then I would like have a breather with a cup of tea or something, and then I'd delete it.
Okay.
And I'd feel slightly better or maybe a little bit less angry at the world. It's the same with like writing a letter and burning it, that sort of thing. By the end of the post, the tone of it had changed, and I legitimately felt sorry for the people that hadn't met her because I realized that people that would be reading this post hadn't met her. And I realized how lucky I was to have had that time with her rather than being angry at not having more time.
Mm.
And so I decided then and there that I was going to do stuff in 2024. I was doing stuff anyway, but I was like, right, okay, let's ride that verge of burnout and let's make things happen. And, any of that spare time, I decided to write. You know, six 6 weeks later, I had a horrible manuscript in my hands that had to get edited copious amounts of time. But it was yeah. The further down that line I went, the more I was like, this is actually needed. I think so. That was the lead up to it, um, and it. So the business is called the app is called or will be called Pipin. We're um, currently pitching to investors at the moment to get that off the ground.
Yeah.
And what I tried to do with it as well, just a bit of fun. People, why is it called Pipin? Well, so I wrote a story about, it leads into why this is needed. A good example of someone falling at each hurdle and understanding and finding their way. And it also goes into a really nice story about why the app is called Pipin.
Mm. And one of those themes that is prevalent throughout the book is overcoming that adversity. So failures and moving past that. Why is that an important thing for people to understand and sort of get comfortable with?
Nothing is finite. Death is finite. Nothing else is. And especially people seem to think money is this like a movable object. Money comes in, money goes out, sometimes too quickly. But money comes in, money goes out all the time. Like it is a river. It is constantly flowing. It doesn't sit in one place. So if you think it's sitting somewhere, I can guarantee you it's not. It's moving behind the scenes. If people get hung up on making mistakes, especially in finance, it can cause some issues. But at the same time, is it only causes permanent issues if you permanently fixate on it. So understanding that, and it says on the basically on the back of the book, it says, you know, falling over is okay as long as you dust yourself and get back up. I mean, that's a general life lesson, right? But people miss it in finance.
Mm.
So if you overspend on something, okay, what does that mean? It means you're in the red. And okay, well, money's coming in, going out all the time. I just ever so slightly reduce the money that's going out. If I can increase the money that's coming in, even better. You know, you can learn more, work harder, do a slightly different job, aim for that promotion. You can move, you can make moves. It's not insurmountable. People do it all the time. And if you think it's insurmountable, then prove yourself wrong. Or prove yourself right. You know, you could be right. It could be outside your capabilities or control. Right. That's a path dead end. I'm going to go back to the last known location that was a Y split, and I'm going to go down the other path.
Yeah.
People sit down on the road and look at the blockage in front of them and go, can't get past that. Okay, well, it's okay to go backwards for a time before finding another path where you can try. And life is a maze, right? It's just finding the right path to be on. We're all still figuring out what path we're on, and we'll never know if it's the right one.
I like the idea of it being a maze. And like you say, no one will ever know 100%. You're an outcome of all of the different decisions you've made and gone back on and adjusted. So, one of the topics that sort of was touched on later in the book was imposter syndrome. So, the main character sort of suffers a bit of that. And there's a really nice bit I liked about where it was rephrased to him. So, he says that he's not comfortable. And his mentor in the book replies saying, all progress takes place outside the comfort zone. If you're uncomfortable, that means you have the opportunity to grow. So don't call it imposter syndrome. Call it a growth opportunity because that's exactly what it is. I really liked that because I like the idea of rephrasing things. And imposter syndrome is something that people speak a lot about, but it's spoken about as a negative. So talk a little bit about that and how that rephrasing can change things.
I'm glad you picked up on that. I'd love to take credit for it. I can't. um, all progress takes place outside the comfort zone, for one, is quite a well known saying. And the growth opportunity reframe is a Stephen Bartlett thing.
Okay.
So I can't take credit for that. I will say that, you know, the character in the book said it, I didn't. Um, but I loved it. And understanding, and this is what the mentor does all the time. She forces Liam to question his beliefs, and the imposter syndrome, interestingly, comes from the fact that in his mind he still thinks that he's the character at the beginning of the book, and he hasn't got a clue. And you know, he's come so far in his journey that someone else is now asking for his advice, right? And there's a lot of me in the book. You know,
I can see
so
that.
there's going to be, and in the early drafts there was a lot that even one of my early proofreaders told me to take out, which is quite funny. But we all have at certain points, and I say that fairly loosely. I'm sure there are some people in this world that are so confident in their abilities, rightly or wrongly, that they don't. But I do strongly believe that if you're plodding, it goes back to, if I'm the same person as I was 5 years ago. There's no chance in that 5 years that I've got uncomfortable,
Mm.
and I don't. It depends what you want in life. If I sometimes envy the people that are wrapped up here in their own little bubble and completely blissfully unaware and are just comfortable and enjoying life. And I sometimes question, is that what we should be doing? Is that what life should be like? I don't want that personally. I don't disagree that that's a lovely idea and concept. And, I don't hold it against anyone that can do that. I can't do that. I want to have a big social impact on the world. And I can't do that if I'm comfortable. And I need to be on the verge of breaking. I need to be on the risk reward verge to be able to maximize my impact. So when people say things to me that are, you know, anything other than criticism or teaching me, when people come to me for advice, which happens more thinking about it than I would have ever thought, I do get that. Like, who am I to be giving you this? Like, why have you come to me? I'm still very much, it's me and my dog. There is no one else. I don't have responsibility. I don't own a house. I don't have kids. I don't have another half that, you know, not married. I have no responsibility other than me and my dog. So therefore I still feel like a kid, and I still feel in that mindset. So I have that imposter syndrome, and I have to constantly remind myself. The way that I write, tangent here and apologize, but the way that I write is more a reminder to myself, more a lesson to myself than really anything else.
Yeah.
So I my editor cut that chapter out and said that she didn't see the relevance or the point or how it progressed the story. I don't think it does progress the story. It progresses the mindset and the character.
Mm.
And I think it's um, Walter Mosley calls it being pedestrian. Being pedestrian in writing is basically having the reader relate to your character in a very pedestrian manner, and it makes him pedestrian. Like it makes him super relatable, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
And by that time, he, spoiler, it's a story. He's fairly successful. He's still got some struggles going on, and gets harder and harder as his life goes on, as life feels like it does.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting because the common theme, as you say, this adversity, it's either external forces, which he has a lot through the book, but he also has those internal, like we all do. Um, and it's still this, right, let's reframe it, let's push through it, and let's prove ourselves right or wrong.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And yeah, whoever said it, it came through your book to me. So yeah, that's where I learned it. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Um, Again, after the actual story finished, there's a few other bits to sort of read through. And I quite like the bit where you broke down who the characters were inspired by. So they were sort of amalgamations of people throughout your own life. Um, and you spoke about Helen, so that's a character who comes in late, and you spoke how she shows all three of the things that you look for in someone who will be successful in life. So the three things that you listed are being genuinely interested, being able to step back and think, and proactively taking action. Why those three things?
I can't remember who said it, but Interested people are interesting. Bored people are boring. And that always stuck with me. And it's true, a bit like today, and it's a bit uncomfortable for me, but you mentioned before we started recording that you thoroughly enjoy the conversations. People generally, the topic they know most about is themselves. Generally, the topic they're most happy to discuss is themselves or the knowledge they can share. And if you're genuinely interested in that person, regardless of what it is, if you can take an interest, not only will you learn, but you'll be trusted and you build good relationships. And life isn't about what you know. It's not even about who you know. It's about who knows you, and more importantly, who trusts you. And if someone says they're a great person, you could probably understand that that person doesn't actually know much about that person because they think that they're an amazing person because they have been interested in that other person. Doesn't matter who you are. And I can't remember who taught it to me, whether it was peers or friends or family or whoever it was. But I remember one of my earliest memories being told it does not matter who people are in this world, they are still people.
Mm.
And it's the whole, and I hate saying this, and I'll explain why in a minute, but you know, you should show the same level of humanity to the janitor at school than you do the headmaster. The reason I hate saying that is because it suggests that the janitor is below the headmaster in terms of like pay, yeah, but in terms of like their contribution to that sphere, they're totally different. Um, and a janitor soon after I this is my memory is helped me out massively. I was, locked out on a weekend. I'd left something in. I needed to get it, and and they could have turned around and went, "Go away. It's the weekend,"
Mm.
and they helped me out and sorted me out. And it's because I treated them exactly the same as I treated everyone else. Uh, if you go further than that and take an interest, then people will trust and like you. And that's powerful, but it has to be genuine because people will see through if you're doing it for something,
Yeah, for your gain.
for your gain, right? If you're doing it because you're genuinely interested, it's a hard thing to do. But if you are genuinely interested, then if the scenario comes up where you need to ask them for something, or you could ask someone else, but you would like to ask them, they're more likely to jump at the chance to help. Um, but law of reciprocation comes in as well, and but yeah, so that's the first one. Being able to take a step back and think is basically me saying being able to think for yourself, step back out of the situation, and not even in the heat of the moment, anytime, but being able to get someone's opinion, think about it, formulate your own, and move forward. Or even once you have your opinion, opinions are subjective. If someone presents you good facts, a good argument, and you can assess that, think about it. People sometimes, when they have their opinion, can't even think about another side of things. And if you decide your opinion is still true to what you believe, great, but you've thought about it.
Mm. Very stoic, that.
Hmm. And then taking proactive action. Taking action's great. But if someone tells you you need to do this and you take action, you do it, that's great. That doesn't lead you to being extremely, maybe beyond your capability, successful. Being proactive does. Because if you're proactive, you can get things wrong. If you're proactive, you don't need someone else. You're autonomous. And so if you can think for yourself, act for yourself, but have those people around you and just generally be a good human being.
Mm.
Notice I didn't mention anything about having values or anything like that, because you can people have different values. I don't expect, I have 5 core values myself. I don't expect other people to share those values. They belong to me. Um,
Suppose that doesn't necessarily impact success in life. Success, I suppose, is subjective to the person as well. But you could have very different values and still be successful. So those things are almost separate from that.
yeah, and everyone has values. A lot of people don't know what they are, but people act in accordance to their values. So yeah, whether you know them or not, it doesn't make a difference, and there shouldn't be any pressure for people to understand their values. They need to be able to understand that they will act or have some values which makes them act the way that they do, which is why point um, 2 comes into it with which is thinking.
Yeah, I really like those 3 points. And it was weird reading just the afterwords of the book and sort of seeing that, but then actually having something like that that stood out a lot. And you've just explained them really well and really in depth and sort of given scenarios. So yeah, that's really good. The other thing at the back of the book that I noticed was you had some questions for sort of like for people to ask at their book clubs, which was I don't know if that's quite a common thing with books, but
I don't know either.
I liked it anyway. But I wanted to flip one of the questions back to you. So obviously working in on the app at the moment. So the question was, how do you think technology is changing the way we learn about and manage our finances? And the second part was, what potential benefits and drawbacks do you see in relying on apps and digital tools for financial guidance?
No doubt the technical. By the way, I'm just going to precede this with I wrote the questions to inspire interesting conversation in groups or between people. There is no right or wrong answer. I didn't, quite frankly, consider these myself in terms of how I would answer them because I thought there's always conflicts and internally about all of this that I'd be really interested to see play out in a group. So I would love to hear other people's thoughts and opinions on this. Technology, no doubt, is changing the way that we live. We can't get past that. Even with the increase in popularity with Gen AI, it's irrevocably changed the way that we are proceeding to live, work, be.
Mm.
So the question that I then had to ask is it enabling or is it being quite restrictive or detrimental in how we think and act?
Hmm.
Specifically in this scenario when it comes to finance. And so I wanted to create something that enabled, that made life better, that took pressure away. I cannot remember. My memory is terrible. So whenever I say I can't remember, I'd love for people to find the source of whatever I'm saying. But I remember reading somewhere that the advancement of technology is meant to has always been to help take the pressure off human beings, to give us a easier, better life. And interestingly, I'm sure it was they referenced a research paper had been done suggesting that actually it's quite the opposite. It's actually made our lives a lot more stressful.
Mm.
And I don't know whether it's me getting older and seeing more of this in the world or directly looking for it. But kids these days um, seem to be struggling with their mental health a lot more than even our generation, but certainly generations above.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes down to technology. And the best example here was the invent of the washing machine was meant to save the housewife at the time. So that's not my opinion. That is at the time was meant to save the 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 person in the household that washed clothes the time, so that they could have more leisure time.
Yeah.
It meant that they had more time to do other things, and so there was pressure to be productive elsewhere. Well, if that machine is doing that task that used to take you 4 hours, then you've got 4 hours to do other things, like clean the rest of the house or start a business or, you know, take over the world, whatever it might be. And I see technology as that. If you look at Gen AI, I use Gen AI all day, every day. It enables the things that I'm doing in work. What it's done is made me a lot more efficient and a lot more productive. Has that meant that I could cut my hours down from 8 a day to 5 a day? Yeah. Do I? No. I just get another 3 hours of very good work done. So I'm doing 2 weeks worth of work in a week. So the expectation rises now. Well, you've got this capability, so you should be able to deliver this. I've I understand we're straying from the question. Um, but the point of, is technology good? Um, yes and no. It is, if it's done right and actually enables you to do other things.
Mm.
I think with Pipin and what we're intending to do is we're fully aware that people aren't doing this now anyway. So what it's going to do is it's going to enable them to live exactly the same life, same pressures and everything else, but should give them the peace of mind about their finances being in some sort of order it wasn't in before.
Mm.
And if they delve further into it, then they can have that deeper understanding. If they don't, then at least it's being managed for them, right? Financial planner in their pocket type stuff. So it won't open capacity up for people to have the pressure to do anything else. What it should do is just giving them that peace of mind. A lot of financial tools at the moment either promise to get things in order, but is only a piece of the puzzle, which is why it falls down, or you need the understanding to be able to use that tool properly. And people don't want to put that extra layer in. So I think that's where Pippin's quite different to all those other tools. Um, but go on, repeat the question again, and I'll try and give you a very short, direct answer to the second half.
Well, yeah, you answered the first bit really well and sort of spoke about how it's changing. And I think when you speak about how it sort of speeds up what's happening already and it's meant to buy you that extra time, whilst that's extra time that we could potentially put into useful activities, or I say useful, but sort of buy that time back for ourselves, we end up just putting more work on top of it. And like you say, we're just filling it with extra stuff that's causing the same level of stress. So yeah, I definitely sort of see the pros and cons of it, and it's sort of how it's used as well is a big aspect of it. Um, but yeah, the second part was just the benefits and the drawbacks in relying on apps and digital tools for financial guidance.
Part of there's a lot of subscription-based business models. Let's take Zero, for example, counting software, or you know, the, all of the a lot of the subscription-based models where you put a lot of your time and effort into, um, they've got you. And quite frankly, Pippin is not relying on that at all. It's not intent to be a trap. It's meant to help people. But there is a point at which, once you've got all of your information in there, you don't want to lose that. You don't, and it's the control. You don't want to lose that control. So you end up relying on that thing, and it's quite difficult to change unless you're forced into it. Um, and I don't ever want people thinking like that. I want people to going, I don't care because this is helping, and I want to provide more value than they're paying. That's the whole point. It's actually a tiered subscription model. So actually, the less you can afford, the less you're actually going to pay for it. So it's accessible to everyone. It's another thing that a lot of the other apps aren't. But the direct answer is we as humans need autonomy as much as possible. Relying on anything or anyone takes control out of your hands. And it sounds quite pessimistic, but if you have control, you have the ability to take decisive action yourself in whatever path you want to go down. As soon as you're relying on something or someone, that is restricted somewhat. A friend of mine's a social media influencer. Let's say her Instagram is shut down. It was for a week. I luckily had a contact in Instagram that managed to open her account up. But say her Instagram's completely shut down or that company goes bust or whatever, her what's her business model?
Mm.
She's reliant on that. So there is a bit of a danger in relying on it, the wrong tools, or if things change because you've got less room for maneuver. So if you're going to do that, and it's kind of inescapable these days, pick a tool that gives you that flexibility and freedoms to understand that life is not one size fits all.
And I suppose that leads me onto the last question quite well. Talk a little bit about Pipin. What can people expect from that app? Obviously, you're currently looking for investors, but when it launches, what sort of things will that offer?
The whole idea is to give people a one place so that they can see their lifestyle and the impact that certain things will have on that. People tend to plan a lifestyle without understanding if they can afford it either way. And so what it will do is it will allow them to see that visually and understand what impact that has and therefore what they then need to work towards or think about all the questions to ask someone. And it will tweak, give hints, give tips. It gamifies it as well. So it will be quite entertaining and fun to be uh, in the platform as much as finance can be, right? There is still a level of it's numbers on a screen, but it's covering at the very start when we launch, it will cover the financial position of your lifestyle. And that is the three areas I mentioned earlier, which is your living budget, your fixed outgoings, and your envelopes, whatever they may be. Once you've mapped that out and it quite easily talks you through and helps you out with it and gives you some ideas, and then it reconciles your transactions, it understands what your goals are, where you're going with things, your spending habits. It understands that all completely contained, so it's safe and secure in your little bubble, and understands your life. So if you said I'm going to spend £100 in food, and actually your lifestyle is you're spending £300 in food, then it goes okay. Let's adjust this. You're spending 300, so let's not try and get that down to 100. Let's get that down if you want to reduce it to 280 and see how that goes. And if you can do that, let's see if we can get that to 260. Or that's clearly for you a big thing in life, right? One of the things that I really enjoy is having food. Um, so I have a larger budget for food out than I do for shoes or clothes or whatever else. People might value that more than eating out. So it's seeing based on your lifestyle and it has that holistic view, but it will, without getting you educated, unless you want to, there'll obviously be some of that there if you want to, but only if you want to. It will reconcile as best it can. The more you dig into it and change, the more it's going to learn and the more accurate it's going to be. But it does it for you. So there's a lot of platforms. I mean, actually, Zero for Business is a great example. If you don't reconcile it, you've got a backlog of reconciliations that you need to sift through and just spend days untangling. This won't be that. So it can be as simple or as complex as the user wants it to be. That's the intent. But it will look super simple. And if you want to go digging into the weeds, you can go digging into the weeds quite nicely and quite easily. So what it will do is it will give you control and an understanding as to what your money's doing, where you're at in terms of your whole sort of lifestyle balance. It gives you a score based on you as a user, your position, your everything else. There is no obstacle it can't overcome, quite frankly. There is the score is fluid, the money is fluid. You your things like your habits and the actions that you take on the app will go into part of your PIP score, not necessarily being in the red. If you know you can have a decent PIP score because you're doing the right things. That's more of an indicator as to where you're going to be than it being in the red. If you're in the red and people think that's negative, there is no red on the app, by the way, because it's too negative.
Yeah.
And being with having a minus figure, quite frankly, doesn't mean that much. Um, the actions and habits that you have that you're taking to overcome that step by step, if you're going to get there, if you're doing the right things, you'll have a high PIP score. Because I value someone taking the right steps than someone just getting an inheritance and being in the black. You can have a low PIP score, even though you've got a load of money behind you, because you're doing the wrong things, which will lead you to not achieving your goals. So it's all about trying to get you to achieve your goals in the subtlest way possible and in a tempo that suits you. So when you log onto the app, it will run you through everything, get you to set up some figures, and it'll explain. Look, this is. Let's reassess this next month. Let's assess this in 3 months, whenever suits you. But we need to reassess this because what you think is the case, or what you think might be the case, might not be. My budget, I spend more money in December than I do in January because of Christmas. Things happen. If you go on holiday, you've spent more money before that holiday, paying for the holiday. You might spend, less money on your groceries whilst you're on holiday because guess what? You're not buying groceries on holiday. You're probably eating out a bit more. So it understands all this and plans for it. But the first thing that you'll see is your PIP score. You can go onto the networking side and see how you stack up to people in your group, and that's not sharing any of your financial information. That is just your PIP score. You get points based on some of the things you do, and it's the points that sort of show in this league table. And there'll be prizes, there'll be some cool stuff, and it should be fun, engaging. But at the very least, people can go on there and just know that they're in a good place, or they're working towards being in a good place.
Awesome. Sounds really good. I look forward to seeing it and using it in the future. I think that's a nice place to sort of bring it in. So if people want to follow what you're doing with that and yourself, where can they stay up to date with that? Can they find you online?
Me personally, LinkedIn's the best place. I'm not a big social media user. We had a chat before this. The chief marketing officer of Pipin is very good at all the marketing stuff, so I'm leaving that with him. Um, the book is the main place is pipin.app, Pipin .app, APP. That is for the app. Obviously, there's a list. It's not out yet. If there's any investors that want to get in contact, we're currently going through pitching the rest of the year, and then the first round will close very early, 2025. So we should start that project, and we're hoping to have something a bit more for our beta. For basically, there's a list where people can sign up to be a beta tester, or just get notifications of, and so that's the place to do it. Pipin.app/book. Obviously, people can then see a bit more information about Pippin's Rich Life.
Awesome. And yeah, I'd recommend that book for anyone who wants to learn a bit more about finance. And yeah, it's also in a nice fictional way, so it's very easy reading. But I took away quite a lot from it as well. So yeah, thank you for coming on. From our side, so if people want to stay up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on Instagram and on TikTok, which is at Lonely Chapter Podcast. On Twitter, it is lonely_chapter. And lastly, from me, thank you for listening.